Hello, and welcome to the Desert Lady Diaries podcast, a weekly conversation with women who found their home in the Mojave Desert. I'm your host, Dawn Davis, and this is episode number 29. If you're a first-time listener, welcome. And if you're a returning listener, thank you so much for coming back. If you're looking for more information about the podcast, past guests, want to catch up on previous episodes, or just want to drop me a line, it's all at the website, desertladydiaries.com. We're also on Facebook and Instagram at Desert Lady Diaries. So when I was working on the intro and outro for this week's podcast, I realized at the end of Jenny Q's episode last week, I told you that author Mary Collier would be on this week. Well, I lied. I looked at the production calendar for April instead of for March, and these are the perils of producing a podcast while you're in the middle of a run of a stage performance and a staged reading. So if you're wondering when Mary's episode will air, that will be April 3rd. So, surprise, this week's guest is Cheryl Montelle. Cheryl talks about her path from St. Louis to Los Angeles and eventually to Joshua Tree, and her inspiration to create Mill Tree, a nonprofit organization that brings veterans and civilians together through art. Hi, and welcome back to Desert Lady Diaries. Today, my guest is Cheryl Montelle, who's been a resident of the High Desert since 1991. She created Desert Stories, which is now in its 11th year, and is the founder of Mill Tree, a nonprofit that brings veterans, active military, and civilians together through arts and dialogue. She's married, has a daughter, and hails from St. Louis, Missouri. She was also a professional dancer and actress in New York City and did a good amount of acting, commercials, and voiceovers in Los Angeles. She is currently a Pilates fitness trainer as well and has been doing that for over 30 years. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi.
Hi. Well, as we always start out, since you've been coming to the desert from 1991, what was your first experience with the desert?
Well, I came out here sort of on a glorified date with my now husband, but my then new boyfriend, Brian Leetart. Once we went through the pass, I really never came out to the desert. I was in LA doing my thing, and I thought I had landed on the moon. I didn't really know where I was. We went into the park, and I'd never seen anything like that. I felt like I had entered a Flintstone cartoon, and I was mesmerized. And then we went to visit our friends Sarah and Steve Bardwell up in Burns Canyon, where they had bought a parcel of 40 acres, and subsequently, we ended up buying 40 acres right across the wash from them. So I do remember one of my best girlfriends was in the Martha Graham Company, and they were performing in Palm Springs. So, of course, I went out there to see her, and I said, Maxine, I've got to take you to Joshua Tree. You're not going to believe this, and I did. And again, we just never seen anything like it.
Right,
so it was pretty awesome.
Yeah, it is amazing. It struck me immediately the first time I came here, and 3 months later I was living here. So it can grab a hold of you if you're open to that sort of thing. So you come here for the first time with then boyfriend, and things progress. So at some point, you decided to live up here, and you're living up here part-time now, but you've obviously got your roots in the community. How did that whole process take place with deciding we're going to do this, and we're going to live up there?
Well, for several years, we lived up Burns Canyon, right past Rimrock Ranch, actually. And we camped on this 40 acres that we bought for about 3 or 4 years. And then we built a little house, kind of an architectural cabin, really. And in 2006, it burnt down in the Sawtooth Fires.
Oh, gosh.
And it was devastating. My daughter was about 7 or 8. We loved that place. I had a little canned ham trailer where I would go out and write. It was a very small house. Lily, our daughter, was basically on one half of the bedroom while we were on the other half of the bedroom. And when it burned down, being a writer, I wrote about it, and it got published in the Sunrunner magazine. And because in Los Angeles I would do spoken word, I would write, personal stories and perform them, I thought, gosh, I should just create some kind of spoken word event and read my story just for fun, Right. And I approached Jared at the High Desert Cultural Center, and I said, would you like a small spoken word fundraiser? And he said, sure. It was just like that.
Right.
And then I went around the community and talked to like Ted Quinn. I said, do you want to be in my spoken word event? And I didn't even know him.
Right.
That's how generous this community is. And he said, sure. And Victoria Williams said, sure. And this one and that one said, sure. So about 8 of us performed to probably about 50 people. But word of mouth got out, and we did it the next year, and there were 100 or 150. And from then on, it was sold out to full capacity at the Black Box Theater. I've watched the Black Box Theater get more organized and changed, and that's been really wonderful to see as well. But Desert Stories really thrust me into the community, and so the burn of my house became like a phoenix rising.
Definitely.
Out of the ashes, something new was born. So that's how I first got more involved in the community of Joshua Tree, the Morongo Basin, but we ended up eventually buying and renovating a house up Quail Springs Road in the Highlands.
Okay, yeah.
So now we're in town.
That's a great story. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And I've been myself to, well, as we just talked about before we started, at the Black Box doing work there. It's an amazing facility. The two of us having seen some facilities in LA, it's, some steps above even some of those.
Well, yeah. When I think Black Box, it wasn't, this is like Black Box on steroids.
Exactly, right. It's very technically advanced. And
state of the art.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So let's go back a little bit to growing up in St. Louis and then moving to New York City to do dance. Before you got here, I read Thong and Dance.
Oh.
One of your stories out on your website, CherylMontelle.com.
Yeah.
And I loved the story of you talking about going to the concert with your own mom. And you were there with your daughter having an experience.
Yeah.
But in there, I got the sense that seeing those performances may have inspired you somewhat to get into the arts. And your mom was also a dancer? Is that right?
My mom got married at about 19, so she was a dancer, but just for community events and things. And in fact, she was part of a group of women called Those Girls, and they all danced. And my ballet teacher was her jazz teacher. And yeah, so I started dancing at 6, and something life-changing happened around 10 years of age. The Australian Ballet came through with Rudolf Nureyev, and they were doing Don Quixote, and they needed kids, and I got to be one of the kids.
Wow.
So I was in a scene with Nureyev, and I think I was more excited about backstage than on stage. And, I was bit hard with the performing bug.
Right.
And at that time it was dance. And also, chorus line is not far off for most dancers. It's either a way to get out of the house or to feel you belong or whatever. And dance and the dance studio became very important to me as my parents were breaking up. It was also a friendlier community than my junior high or grade school. It was a little cliquey where I grew up. I grew up in the suburbs of St. Louis, and I felt like I fit in more in the dance community in St. Louis, and I had friends from all over St. Louis, not just my small suburbs. So it fed something in me, a sense of community. Right. And I have to say that pretty much community is what moves me. Anything I do seems to be about community, and at the time it was dance. So then I went to a performing arts boarding school for high school in Champaign, Illinois, called the National Academy of Dance. It later became the National Academy of Arts because they included music. But then I was really cloistered in a dance world. Took a year off. My mom and my sister had moved to San Francisco, to actually Marin County, Mill Valley. Okay. Took a year off because I was a 14-year-old mixed up kid, not into drugs or anything, but I wasn't sure what I really wanted to do. Had a great year in California, but realized I did want to dance. Went back to the academy and graduated, and at 17 went up to New York and got a scholarship at the Alvin Ailey School.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so I was on scholarship there, and then I would work at a jeans store when I wasn't dancing, and then, it was a crazy time. It was a great time in New York. It was
I was going to say, because I lived in Jersey. I grew up in Jersey.
It was like so I got my partying. I partied pretty hard for about 6 months, got mononucleosis, and then,
oh my goodness.
got more focused again. But, it was a very creative era for dance and theater and music, just an unbelievable time. And I was there.
Yeah, that's great.
It was really something.
Wow.
And got into musical theater. My first, actually, the first show I did in New York was at La Mama. I did Aristophanes' The Birds. I was a bird. And that was incredible. I mean, Sam Shepard and Joseph Chaikin and Hair and all kinds of things started there. So I loved it. But then I got my equity card and did Carousel with Robert Goulet.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, so that was crazy.
Yeah. So. Wow, what a great time, really, to have been there. That is true. Yeah. So then at what point did you say, I need to go to LA?
Okay, so I lasted in New York for 10 years, lived in the Village, had just amazing friends, amazing experiences. Finally was not waitressing in between performing jobs. I actually was in a group called La Clique, which was like an entertainment company. So I was a dancer in that, and there were improv artists and drag queens and stilt walkers, and we would do all kinds of events from, Elizabeth Taylor aid benefits to bar mitzvahs to mafioso parties, I don't know, you name it. But it was no means to any end, and I was starting to go blah, 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 in New York. I was there 10 years, so I was 27 when I decided to move to Los Angeles. The way I operate is I don't know exactly why I'm doing it. I just jump, and I would say that's another theme in my life. I jumped to New York, I jumped to LA, I jumped into marriage, I jumped into motherhood. It's just, I needed to get out of New York. And when I came to LA, I got a waitress job at this place called Ed DeBevick's, which was really very kind to actors and performers. And from there, I got my commercial agent. I actually booked commercials through the place. I did Gracie Allen improv throughout the restaurant, not waitressing. One thing led to another. But I also had this Pilates background. And so my Pilates mentor, who studied with Joe Pilates, Kathy Grant, got me hooked up with my friend Jillian Hessel, who had a Pilates studio, and I started teaching Pilates, and then that became a rather major career. I ended up having 2 studios.
Nice. And I think you're having an event coming up with like a workshop.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. You did do your homework.
I did do my homework. It's with Risa Shepard. It's called Core to Core. And it's April 6th through 8th, 2018.
Yeah.
And
well, we're hosting Wendy Arbuckle.
Okay.
Risa and I are hosting a teacher from Austin, Texas, and she's just a really interesting teacher, works with the somatic end of exercise. I won't go into all of that because I don't want to bore the audience.
Technical.
It's technical. But it's for Pilates teachers and fitness trainers. And one of the things I do now to earn a living is I host really great Pilates teachers or Pilates adjacent teachers in other fields that correspond to Pilates for teachers, because I don't learn at conventions. So I just thought, well, I'll just host workshops. So I still teach Pilates part-time in Los Angeles when I'm there, Tuesdays and Thursdays. And I'm going to start teaching in Joshua Tree as soon as I get my shit together. If you don't mind me saying that on the radio.
Yeah, don't mind you saying that.
Because I do want to be out here more.
Right.
But right now I still have to earn a living.
Right. Now, where are you teaching on Tuesdays and Thursdays?
I teach I rent space at a studio called Pilates by the Park in West Hollywood.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and also Bodies and Balance in Studio City. So I teach it. I don't have my own studios anymore. When Lily was born, Brian, my husband, could afford us, and I was just like, you know what, I'm stressing out, and I don't want to do that to a newborn who's nursing, So I just whittled down my business to a few hours every day, and then it got smaller and smaller as I'm coming out here more, spending more time out here.
And it served you well, 30 years. That's a long time to... stay with something.
I was very, very well trained, and most dancers do Pilates, but I was very well trained in New York. I mean, I've been very lucky to have cream of the crop mentors in basically everything I do: writing teachers, Pilates teachers, and dance teachers, and acting teachers when I was doing that.
Switching gears from that career, you're out here in Joshua Tree, and something spurs you to create a nonprofit where the public, civilians, and the military are engaged in dialogue and arts. Where did that inspiration come from?
Yeah, that's a really great story too. And again, for me, the desert has really opened me up and given me the space and the yes to create. There's just not the competition that there is in Los Angeles. And it's kind of a long story. I had read a novel called The Lotus Eaters by Titania Soleil, which the main character was a female photojournalist that covered Vietnam, and she got addicted to war. Her nervous system got addicted to the rush of adrenaline. And I just found that, I don't know, something in me was sparked by that. It must have been some mirror of my own adrenaline rushes. And I looked in the bibliography, and there were books by Tim O'Brien, The Things We Carry, and another one that he'd written. And I read those. And then I was recommended to read Dr. Ed Tick's book, War in the Soul, which was not a novel. It was talking about how PTSD is a soul wound. And he is a psychologist who's worked with a lot of Vietnam vets. And he takes you through the mythology of the warrior and how they're initiated into war, and how in this culture they're not really initiated out of war. And I don't know. It really touched me. And I mean, I do have family members that have been in the military, but not my dad. I mean, he was in the reserves. He was in the Navy in St. Louis. Go figure. What does that mean?
Right.
But my stepdad was in the Marines, but I didn't grow up with my stepdad. He came in later, and my nephew on my husband's side was also a Marine. But again, it didn't define who I am. Right. But something touched me, and in the book, Ed said, if you really want to make a difference, create a community organization that brings veterans back into community. I called him because we have the same writing teacher. I said, are you going to be in the Southern California area? And he's from the East Coast, and he said, I am. So I brought him out. You're crying.
I am.
Oh, there must be a story there. But I brought him out to do a book reading and a community talk. And then I took my Desert Stories mailing list, and I said, hey, who wants to help me create a community group to help veterans back into community? So a group of people came. We met was the Red Arrow Gallery. It's now the Beatnik. Not many of the same people are in my group, but that group came. We started it. We started having dialogue. We called them speak outs, where we just go around the circle. And the community itself absolutely embraced the idea. So one of the most significant things we did early on was something called the Art of War. And I have to thank Carrie Hayes for this idea. I think she was then president of the MBCAC, but I'm not sure. She was very involved in that and may still be. She turned me on to an idea of having veterans write something and then list their writings on the website, and then having artists from the community match the writings with visual art. So we did this, again, at the time it was the Red Arrow, the first year, and oh God, I think it was 2013. I'm not sure. The veterans and active military or family members who wrote were able to do a spoken word portion, and their writing was next to the visual art.
Wow.
And so we had the spoken word event for the opening, and you could not hear a pin drop. So that was really engaging the community into the idea of what Miltree does. And Miltree, the word Miltree came from whoever was at that first meeting. There was a Marine there that said, well, let's put Mill in front of it. And then somebody's like, well, how about Joshua Tree Huggers? And somehow it became, I wanted it to be Milk Tree Huggers, but everybody said no. So it became Miltree. That's how the name came up.
Okay.
But you couldn't hear a pin drop. And then I think it's before we actually did that, we also had a Soldier's Heart Retreat, which is Ed Tick's nonprofit, and it was to facilitate civilians to understand the needs of veterans. And we had 44 people from around the country. We had active military, we had veterans, we had therapists, we had healers, we had a conscientious objector, a pastor too. I mean, it was an incredible retreat at the Joshua Tree Retreat Center. And we just kept going, and the community, people that have buildings, places like JTAG or the station
Bobby
or
First.
Bobby First, everybody has been very generous to letting Milltree do activities at their places. And then 2 years ago, Danielle Giudice Wallace from Arts Connection, San Bernardino's Art Council, called me and said, "Do you want to be a partner in a grant for veterans?" I was like, oh my God, yes. And we came up with Joining Forces Plant to Paper project, which was a big, big project. And we got the California Arts Council grant, Veterans Initiative in the Arts. How could we not? It was such a great idea. And thank you, Danielle. It was clearing invasive plants. So Mojave Desert Land Trust was one of our partners.
Okay.
Clearing invasive plants, making paper out of them, and from there having a workshop on casting, which took the pulp from the plants and did art casting. We made paper, and then there was also silk screening on the paper, and we had a writing workshop. So that it was a number of writing workshops with an art show at the end at the 29 Palms Art Gallery. It was massive. It was massive. And it was successful, and Kate McCabe did a documentary film for us, a little short film. So then one of my Milltree core members and board members, James Golub, who was in the Army, as we were doing outreach for Plant to Paper project, said, I have an idea. I would like to do an earth bag construction. And I was like, that would be great. We can make ceramics that go inside the construction, and maybe we can do a metal thing, and we can really do hands-on stuff.
Right.
So again, I partnered with Arts Connection, and this time we also partnered, I'm sorry, I should mention in the Plant to Paper project, we also partnered with Copper Mountain College, KVCR. I'm trying to think of, I don't want to leave anybody out. We had significant members, Mojave Desert Land Trust, as I said.
Right.
So Danielle and I partnered again, Milltree taking the lead this time, and Joshua Tree Music Festival was a partner. Joshua Tree RV and Campground, Copper Mountain College, once again, to do the Sanctuary Public's Art Project.
Which is absolutely beautiful.
Yes, thank you. And again, we had single Marines, we had veterans, we had a lot of family members and civilians, and
there were many different pieces. This is I'm more familiar because it's more recent.
Yes.
You had people that helped do the bag construction, and then you also had people working with Bobby doing like the welding with the metal artwork.
So Bobby First he created the outline for the sculpture. It was his brainchild. And so people could do the metal workshop with him, where if you didn't know how to weld, you didn't learn how to weld, but you could put something together out of the numerous pieces of rusted metal at Bobby's and create a design. And then whoever did know how to weld would weld it into the framework. And then Brian Bosworth from BKB Ceramics, he led the ceramics workshop at Copper Mountain College and made these great squares with great colors, a real nice theme, a nice patina. And then the other part was actually building the earth bag structure. And that's all on our website on the home page. There's a short film edited by Robbie Robb that's really wonderful.
Because I came the night that you dedicated it, and you had people there playing bowls and people were playing guitar, and that was really nice.
Yes.
The website, if you're looking for it, is mill-tree.org. And you can go out there, and there's also a donation page if you want to make donations for future projects.
We absolutely always need donations. We are pretty cash poor, but a little better than a few years ago, thanks to the community.
Right, and the grants. Yeah.
Well, the grants, all the money that is allotted by grants go into the project that we're working on,
Yeah,
so we have a new project if you're interested.
Oh, well, let's talk about it.
Okay. So we got our third California Arts Council Veterans Initiative in the Arts Grant, and it's called Moving the Memories, a 2-day movement workshop with Diavolo Architecture in Motion. Now, Diavolo is a significant dance company in Los Angeles. It's a brilliant, brilliant company, and they have a veterans outreach program, and they got a zillion grants, and they put on a performance with veterans dancing. You would not know that they were not dancers.
Wow.
I was, having been a dancer, I was so blown away I almost fell over. And so I was lucky enough, I went that night to see them at the Legion of Honor in Los Angeles on Highland. And they did this amazing performance, and I talked to the programming guy, Dusty Alvarado. Long story short, we got another grant. So members of Diavolo and 2 veterans are coming out to lead a movement workshop at the Joshua Tree Retreat Center March 31st and April 1st. So we're very excited about this. What we're going to do is a 2-day workshop, and on that second day, on April 1st, on Easter, we're doing just a little presentation of what was accomplished in the 2-day workshop. So it's just a work in progress, but what Diavolo has done, if you go to the Diavolo website, which I can't remember what it is, but you can Google Diavolo, is amazing what they have done. They have a short film on their website. So I'm so excited, having been a dancer. And, for those of you listening, don't worry about not having ever danced. It's a movement workshop. Don't be shy. Guys and gals are both doing this. This is not mamby-pamby stuff. This is athletic and really could be life-changing for whoever participates. Because whenever you're able to tell your story, whether it's through the written word or movement or music or whatever, things start to shift. And again, this is a way to bring veterans into community and interact with civilians in a significant way in a safe environment.
Well, and what some folks listening might not know is that there are a number of connections here to the military. Whether it was some of the first homesteaders who were instructed to come out because they were affected by mustard gas and the air was better for their lungs. There were many homesteaders who came out that way, to then the Marine training base that is in 29 Palms that we have there. And then just people probably who were from this area who were in the military and came back home and are here. So there's a lot of connections.
Yes, there's a lot of leaders in the community that are veterans for sure. And the Marine base, obviously they have a lot of veterans. Actually, if you're in the Marines and you've deployed, you are considered a veteran, even if you're still active military. So this particular workshop would be for any veteran, any family member, any civilian. I think it is good for, I wouldn't say it's the best one for the younger single Marines that haven't deployed yet. I think this is more for those that have experienced deployment. Because if you're being initiated into the military, we don't want to confuse the issue.
No, right, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of apples and oranges.
Right, yeah, so, absolutely. So having been out here as long as you have, thinking back to when you first started coming, were there any challenges that you came up against? Or if somebody said to you, I'm thinking about moving out to the desert, are there any words of wisdom that you would offer them about coming here?
Well, there's very few restaurants in Joshua Tree. That makes me crazy. Absolutely crazy, because, we have so many tourists now, which is great for the businesses. I'm happy for every business that's making money out here, but locals can't get a decent meal unless you go to Pappy. Well, there's significant restaurants out here, but they're crowded.
Exactly.
So I would say, stock your refrigerator.
Right. And learn to cook.
Because we need more restaurants out here.
Yeah.
So that's how I feel. My hardship, of course, was the house burning down. But again, I truly feel that most things have a gift in them. Hardships always, there is a silver lining. Sometimes it's not as obvious as others, and sometimes it's in retrospect. So I can't believe how lucky I am to live in this community. I've never experienced a community like this, ever, 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 and I don't expect to again. More and more people are moving out here. It's a little overwhelming. On the other hand, I've just met so many nice new people as well. So welcome.
Exactly.
It's an inclusive community.
It is. And I think that's one of the things that when I did my bit of research before I pulled the trigger and just moved, was researching various things on the web, and each thing would lead to another thing. But that was probably the community aspect of things was one of the biggest. Like, there are people who are going to stand up for something if they don't believe it's right. And that was very attractive to me. And then the arts community was very attractive to me. So, and like you said earlier, that arts community attracts a certain kind of, the birds are chiming in on our podcast. That also builds a certain kind of community, because a lot of times people do get involved in the arts because they feel a pull to that. They don't feel accepted or appreciated in other arenas of life. And that's kind of where they come together and create wonderful things.
Well, it's quite a creative community. You've got the visual, you've got the writers, you've got the music, you've got the actors. I mean, you really have everything out here, and thanks to all the people that are doing things, it's growing and growing and growing. And there's space. There's space to be creative. My nervous system is much happier out here than in Los Angeles. Today I'm going back to Los Angeles because tomorrow I work, and I'm used to the commute, but as soon as I hit the 10, I'm back into that traffic and everything.
Exactly.
So,
but you have friends there. Sometimes it's nice to just be there, see that, visit, get the vibe, and then get out.
I mean, I have a life there too,
Sure.
And I live in a beautiful area. I live in Laurel Canyon and in Los Angeles, and there are restaurants.
Right.
Point blank.
So I guess you do a lot of eating when you're there.
Yeah. Actually, my husband's a good cook, so he's
that's good.
But I do believe it's an inclusive community, and I'm on a strategic planning committee for arts and culture right now, and I know that there is a survey going around because we're trying to get a little bit more organized so that artists of all kinds are supported. Tourists know what the hell is going on, because there's 50 million different things going on at one time on one night here, because everybody's being creative all the time. So if this gets out before the survey due date is done, that would be great. If you get the survey on your email, because we're sending it out every way we can, please fill it out, because it's going to only help this community be more organized and supported by San Bernardino County, hopefully fiscally.
That's important.
It's a good thing.
All right. Well, thank you very much for coming today. I appreciate you stopping in before you get on the 10.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you very much for having me.
Thanks so much for listening to the Desert Lady Diaries podcast. I want you to know how much I appreciate you taking the time to tune in. If there was something that enlightened or inspired you, let me know by sharing it with me and the other listeners on the Desert Lady Diaries Facebook page. Next week, I'm talking to Jasmine Schaefer. Jasmine grew up here in the desert and is building her theatrical resume, performing in shows here in the high desert as well as down the hill in Palm Springs. She'll talk about the area's growth that she's seen in her time here, as well as school field trips in the national park. And I'd like to send a big thank you out to Jessica Graybill. Her generous donation covers the cost of this month's hosting fee for the podcast. So thank you, Jessica, for listening and for your donation. If you're enjoying this podcast, I hope you'll consider subscribing on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, SoundCloud, or YouTube. It brings you the episode immediately to your inbox instead of having to search for it every week. And if you're enjoying it, I hope you'll share it with a friend. Thanks so much for listening.